All right, hey, just a quick reminder too, those index cards, right? I think the question and the answer session, I did this a couple years ago here at Dayspring, that was probably the best, right? Because it was so cool to get to plan stuff and to get to talk about stuff that we got to dig into. But the best part I thought, and I'm sure you would agree, Carol, was like your guys' personal individual questions that you had. Again, these are anonymous, you don't have to write your name on them, but we're gonna answer them. Whatever you guys wanna know, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna get you a good answer. So take some time on those index cards, come up with a good question that you want to know an answer to, and we will go through those and definitely bring those up. So, I know we've got a couple more people still out. You want to give them a minute, or do you just want to get going? I think we have one more minute.
No, one
more minute. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, if you have your questions already ready, feel free to. We've got more cards if you need more cards too. If you got like multiple questions. We're also gonna, we have an evaluation sheet.
We're gonna have fun.
All right, Carol's passing out another set of index cards because we dropped the ball on the evaluations. Like, we wanted to get feedback from you guys about how this went, information that you would have liked to maybe have heard talked about that wasn't, or maybe stuff that you thought was good. It's good to know what was good. Things like, would you recommend this to a friend? Was this worth your time? Just kind of keep it simple. It's just, we're giving you a blank piece of paper, but you don't have to put your name on it. Please don't put your name on it. It probably gives you a little bit more freedom. You know what I mean? But our goal is definitely to get to do this again. And we definitely have a passion specifically to get to do this on posts, like with our military families. And so if you can speak to anything about that, if you have previous military experience, maybe something that would have been helpful. Man, we want to know about that stuff. We have very thick skins, so don't feel like you can't be honest, but your feedback is invaluable. So just know that we would love for you to spend a few minutes in your afterglow of the sessions, right? Like, that's so important. The afterglow is important. We just talked about that, right? All right, so what happens when sex doesn't go as planned, right? Your microphone doesn't go as planned. Do you want to buckle yourself? Got it?
There we go. Fine.
Good? You're on?
Took a second.
Okay. So we came up with 6 things that we thought might have been the most common, or maybe the least talked about, things that might be going on in our sexual relationships that might go wrong. And what do we do when that happens? So first of all, number 1, this idea of good enough sex. That is an important mentality to have when I go into this relationship with my partner. I need to know that there's something called good enough, right? That it's not going to be perfect all the time. Now, this isn't, I don't know if you take this as an excuse or like as a card you just get to play, like, well, they said it was okay, it was not good enough. It's just building in room for humanity, right? It's building in room for you to be a human, for your situation to be human, and to know that it's not going to go as planned all the time. They would say, research says about 15 to 20%, so almost 1 out of 5 of every time that we've tried to have sex, it didn't go as planned, was like kind of the research criteria. So 1 out of 5 times, sex doesn't go as planned. I got to build that into my expectation. I got to build that into how I understand it may or may not go. You know what I mean? Otherwise, 1 out of 5 times, I'm feeling like I failed, or my spouse feels like she failed, and then failure adds nothing but guilt and shame, right? And then in the afterglow, I'm sitting in guilt and shame, and then I walk into our next cycle with guilt and shame.
And then the anticipation of that, then
why am I looking
really
forward to that?
already, you know, I'm already anxious now, which again is just going to crush the.
Well, and I'm certainly not going to initiate either, right? Because I'm sitting in all of this from the time before. Yeah. But if I know sometimes it just doesn't go as planned, and that's okay, and just allow room for there to be this okayness in the midst of it not being perfect. Also, sex has got to fit into real life. Okay, sex has got to fit into real life, and your real life is different from the person across from you's real life. And a year from now, your real life will be different than your real life a year ago, right? And so sex has to fit into real life, and real life has to fit into sex. You need both of those things happening. And so I need an expectation that fits my life. So I'm going to give you guys a real simple math problem. I don't know if you're math people or not. I hate math. Maybe that's why I was a psychology major. I just had to take a statistics course, and that was it. It's not that I love psychology at all. It's just I hate math that much. So, you know, it's whatever. But I want you guys to write this down, okay? Expectation. I don't have it on a slide because I thought about it on the fly. So I'm going to go back there and type it up. But expectation minus realization equals frustration. The expectation I set minus what actually happened, or what actually happens in the midst of my sexual relationship, equals how much frustration I'm going to experience. So the further my expectation is off what my realization is, the higher or lower amount of frustration I'm going to experience in the midst of this relationship. So I've got to have built-in expectations that say, it's good enough. It didn't work this time. You said no this time. Kid came up, grabbed my toe this time, and we, you know, like.
Right. I think the expectation that says that there are 1 in 5 chances here that this isn't going to go as we initially planned, and that it really can end up well. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of us.
And actually, it's completely normal.
Right. And and that we are safe enough in our relationship to be able to navigate that.
Right. And two, it's important to know what our normal is, what fits into our life right now, and then go and reevaluate that often. I would probably every 6 months to a year, we kind of need to reset what our good enough is, what our real life is, because again, life changes, situations change, health changes, kids get different ages, job situation changes, it all changes. So your normal now won't be your normal 5 years from now.
Right, and that goes back to session 2, the conversation of, because a lot of people go into a sexual experience thinking, oh, he's going to want this to happen, or she wants that to happen. And in reality, when you actually talk about it, it's not. It's not the true expectation. It's what I think the expectation is. And so when we know, there's a lot more we can do with that. There's a lot more flexibility and workability with that.
Absolutely.
So I think there's probably if there's a piece that's really it's super important to sexual stability, I think this is it. That it can be just good enough. Everybody's always worried about how many times and what's the national average, like we have to keep up with the national average, or 2.4 times, what does that mean? You know, and you can read every statistic in the book on what the national average is, and here's what needs to be your average, is what works for you guys.
Right.
If your average is once a week and we are just gloriously basking in that, Yeehaw!
Right.
If you got it every day, did you know there's a study, this couple wanted to prove that you could have sex every day. And so they began to actually put it under the research light and made it a point to have sex every day. And they journaled throughout the process, and it was real interesting. In the process was this complete hatred of each other by the end of the year. And and that was not her hating, and that was mutual, because it had become such demand and such expectation on it, and they knew that they had committed to this, and they really had to complete the process
Right.
I think to write the paper that they were doing. And that it really did just about do them in. And so we find that that really isn't the issue. It's not about frequency in terms of satisfaction. It's really about this point of good enough sex. People can have sex every day, multiple times a day, and it really not ever be fulfilling, because the fulfillment is not in your genitalia, it's in your heart and in your mind. And that's where that lives. And so it's not just about frequency. Nobody's going to tell you, well, okay, you got to get your 4 times in this week, all right? I mean, I guess somebody can tell you that, but you're not going to hear it from us, from that. But so if once, now there is the idea that if you have sex less than once a month, that you are probably moving in a direction that's not healthy. And the reason being is that probably there's fear, there's anticipation of anxiety that's going in there, that the frustration is already built up, maybe there's distance, you don't want to have it fail. I'm sick of being the initiator, the other person needs to do something. Whatever the reason is, and again, I would absolutely seek help for that. So because there are some things, and that's actually, Barry McCarty's a researcher in sex therapy in the United States, is saying that we are in a sexual, just a really seriously bad place sexually. The sexual anorexia is what he's kind of calling it, is so prevalent. And yet we live in such a hypersexualized world. People just aren't having sex like they used to, which is interesting. But we see it so much, and we're exposed to it so much. So there's not a magic number. It's not about an outcome. Remember, it's about what's going into the moment and enjoying that with good enough sex. The next part of that is the big O. We talked about that a second ago, that the big O we're redefining is oneness. The big O is not that we just have an orgasm, but that we are having oneness. We're having that time of integration. We value the intimacy and the connection and the excitement. And we are able to go back to number 1, which is if it doesn't go as planned, we're okay, we're not pouting, we're not distancing, we're not punishing, we're not resisting, but we're talking, and we're moving towards each other. This is also where you see sexual games kind of come in, I think, too. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Not that any of you would do this, but the people you might know in your life who play sexual games, who, there's a punishment factor, there's a resistance, there's a no, if you do this, I'll do that, kind of that negotiating effect of sex, really just doesn't do yourself really much good. Doesn't grow the oneness that you're really trying to look towards.
And we can see that in worship also, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I can't just do something for God because I think I want Him to bless me, or because I'm trying to gain something out of it. Again, that destroys the oneness between Him and I. If it's this quid pro quo type, I did all this for you. Why aren't you blessing me? Or I did,
Right.
And that the distance of that.
It really becomes that kind of quid pro quo.
Right.
I mean,
The parallels are just everywhere.
I've got to work you over. I mean, I'm going to try to, and then we start being manipulative and whatever, and that's really just not healthy in our relationships. All right, so let's get physical. Let's talk a little bit about some of the physical issues that come up with sex. There's the standard ones. I think probably the most obvious ones are the erectile dysfunction. If you watch TV, you will become an expert on erectile dysfunction medications, because it is like a bajillion-dollar industry. The interesting thing about the Viagra erectile dysfunction, the whole market, was that prior to, back when they were beginning to look into the creation of medication, you really just didn't hear a lot about erectile dysfunction. It was only in the aging population. The minute Viagra hit the market, it exploded. And all of a sudden, we see 30-year-old men coming to the doctor for erectile dysfunction issues. Remember what Jonathan said a minute ago, 1 in 5 sexual encounters can have a glitch in it, which can include an erectile dysfunction. If you have it 1 in 5 times, you don't need to go to your doctor and get Viagra. That's not the point. And the only thing Viagra does is increases blood flow. It has no aphrodisiac, it has no special powers, it's not miracle, it's a blood flow medication. It's a vasopressor. That's the beauty of it. So blood flow can be created by lots of things. Exercising, by doing a lot of fun things like taking care of your body. Some of the things that erectile dysfunction that I think are important to know, that 50% of men over 60, you will all be there someday, will have an erectile dysfunction of some kind. Maybe mild, maybe severe, but probably will happen. We're having that larger group of younger men who are experiencing it. I wrote a paper for one of my classes on erectile dysfunction and pornography. Quite an interesting new path of men who cannot have normal sexual function because they have been so indoctrinated with pornography, their bodies literally just cannot perform with vanilla sex with the girlfriend whom they love and care about. And that's kind of where that came from, and I think there's some validity to that, although the research will never say that. You will not see that research done because the porn market is too strong and will keep it from happening. 1 in 7 men will have difficulty with erection, period, across the board. ED is emerging as a vascular disorder. If you have, on a regular basis, as a younger man, and say in your 30s and 40s, if you are regularly having a difficult time with erection, you probably need to go see your heart doctor, because it is a circulation issue. This is becoming part of the diagnostic criteria for diagnosing heart issues. It's circulation, it's blood flow. Medication, let's talk a little bit about medication, because there's probably nothing in our community that we do into ourselves that kills off sex drive as well as performance than medication. The greatest culprit of erectile dysfunction in men is antidepressants. If you are taking an antidepressant outside of Wellbutrin, you are probably going to experience some kind of sexual issue. That's for males and females. Women, if the same part of the brain that your sex drive, your hunger, your emotions are, that the antidepressants go to the SSRIs, as the very part of your brain that affects your sex drive. So you can flatline, when you have like a Prozac or a Zoloft or one of the SSRIs. And all of them, except Wellbutrin, will probably have some sexual effect. If they don't, you just need to pray Jesus, because it's good. I mean, you're one of the better end of that statistic. If you're on blood pressure medicine, same thing. Blood pressure medicines are circulation medicines. Sex is a lot about blood flow, about where it's flowing. And so if it's not flowing well, if you have heart medicines, kidney failure medicines, if you take an antihistamine, you can affect your, if you're taking a lot of heavy duty allergy medicines, you can affect your sexual performance. Especially if you're a woman taking an antihistamine, you need to drink a whole lot more water because it'll dry you up, and that dries everything up. So just keep that in mind. Stress is killing us sexually. That's why we talk so much about staying in the moment and trying to let your sexual life be a haven of release and some richness and fun and some downtime, rather than this pressurized expectation place. Marital conflict, tension, unrealistic expectations, weight, and medication are major contributors to erectile dysfunction. let me just say a word to wives. If you, if not today, it may be later on in your life. And just because you're getting older doesn't mean you will have an erectile dysfunction or that you will lose your ability to have sex. That's not true. But if, as a wife of a man who's having erectile dysfunction issues, what your husband doesn't need you to do is fix that. You need to have a talk about it. You need to discuss it. You discuss it as an issue, but he doesn't need you to coddle him and to mother that. Okay, that it just doesn't work that way. So being very aware of that's a very honest and difficult conversation, but it's an important one. So there's also alcohol and smoking that can contribute to erectile dysfunction. There's the other end of that, which is PE, which is not PE. It's premature ejaculation, which means the ejaculation happens, arousal happens, and then ejaculation happens within less than about a minute and a half. If you're okay with that, that's fine. The beauty of what sex diagnoses, the problems that people have that we diagnose off of, the beauty of that is there's a line in every diagnosis criteria that says only if it bothers the person